Hi there, my name is David Batsoffen and I host a travel blog called Travel and Things. At the moment, I'm doing a series called In Conversation With, and today I'm in conversation with cartoonist John Curtis. John, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, David. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I got thrown for a moment because the name on your screen says Michelle, and I know that you're not Michelle. You look more like Ricky Gervais than you do a Michelle.
Well, actually, you've caught me out there. I am Ricky Gervais. John couldn't make it today.
So what, Ricky, tell me about this new series of Afterlife that you've just completed. Is there going to be a series 3? John, what is it like being a cartoonist in these really, really weird times that we find ourselves? You know, if we go back to the 27th of March, and it was only going to be 21 days, it'll be 100 days tomorrow. And I don't think anybody saw this coming, much like the Spanish Revolution in Monty Python. No, the Spanish Inquisition, nobody saw it coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been fascinating. From a practical point of view, for most cartoonists, including myself, it hasn't impacted on our production of cartoons because most of us work from home anyway.
Yeah.
And we've been able to just carry on. And most cartoonists tend to be very reclusive. I'm not. I like to get out. But so it hasn't really impacted in a big way as far as that's concerned. Although because of the financial stress that it's brought out right across the board, and it's hitting newsrooms. Jack and I just recently lost our 7-year gig with Eyewitness News. They just ran out of budget, and we're hoping to get back to them once they find their feet again. But at the moment, they've just said that they can't afford a cartoon offering. So, and I think a few cartoonists around the world have found that everybody in every industry is being pinched by the financial burden that the whole COVID thing has brought. But from an inspirational point of view, it just came as a breath of fresh air for us. All of a sudden there was just this whole plethora of new inspiration, and we didn't have to pick on people. We could pick on a virus that everybody could get behind, or almost everybody. Some people are still denying that it exists. But we could, it was just fresh from the daily drudgery of corruption and everything else that we'd been focusing on. But I must say, 100 days after the fact, this is also becoming a bit tired. I'm actually looking forward to getting back to nailing the politicians and the crooks and and everyone else that we used to have in our sights.
It's sort of taken your bullseye off Donald Trump for a while, although I think he's still front and center for a lot of cartoonists. You just can't help yourself.
Yeah, well, he's kept himself very relevant, which is one thing that he's very good at doing, and especially, particularly in the whole COVID conversation. And in fact, you asked me to print out a couple of few cartoons.
Yeah. So we got some props.
Yes, so I've picked out 4 quite recent ones that all of which were in the City Press, which Dr. Jack and I do cartoons for every Sunday.
Right.
And this one was, when's this dated? This was the 24th of May, and it was it just shows Donald Trump offering the medical advice that he's been so free and easy with it. I hope I'm going to hold it as steady as I can in front of the camera. I hope you can pick it up.
Yeah. with apologies to Charles Schultz.
Absolutely.
I'm amazed, him being such a narcissist, I'm amazed he hasn't contacted people like yourselves and gone, can I buy the original? Just so he's, because I should imagine he's that type of person that once everything that's written and said and drawn about him to be in his personal possession.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to mind whether it's the attention he gets is positive or negative, as long as he's getting it. I don't know whether he's approached any of the American cartoonists. Of course, every cartoonist around the world has featured him, and so we'd be very flattered if he were to contact us.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of that, whether he contacted any cartoonists in America or elsewhere. But there is an interesting story.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, you were going to say?
I was going to tell you, an old school friend of mine lives in London in the UK. And we did a cartoon which turned out to, unfortunately, it's not one of the ones that I printed out for you, but I can send it to you afterwards. Maybe you can pop it up on the screen while. This was going right back to the original Brexit vote, and Boris Johnson, who was he was Minister of Home Affairs, a foreign minister, I think, at the time, had kind of stepped up to the fore, and he was making noises about Brexit. So Jack and I did a cartoon, which, as the backdrop to which was just a big blue background and the 12 golden stars of the European Union, and there was a British bulldog that had scruffy hair that made him look very much like Boris Johnson, and he was lowering, as if one would do for to half-mast or something. He was lowering one of the stars, which represented the British, the British star in the amongst the 12. Anyway, this friend of mine who lived in London wrote to me and he said, "John, I saw that cartoon, and Boris Johnson is our local representative. And British politics is, there are a lot of beautiful things about it, one of which is your representative is just that. You have access to him. Right. You have his email address." And so he said, "I'd like to send this cartoon to him." And so I said, "By all means, I'll send you a high-res version. And won't you ask him to just sign one and send it back? Get him to sign one for yourself too." So he did that. And sure enough, we got a signed version of this cartoon, which, I mean, it wasn't meant to be flattering. It was meant to sort of mark the, but he took it as flattering, and he was happy to sign it. And so we got something signed by Boris Johnson, who, of course, ended up being the effective cause of Brexit and the Prime Minister.
Although Brexit has now paled into insignificance, I think he, in a way, is going, thank goodness for COVID-19, because now people have forgotten all about Brexit. It won't happen for the next 50 years now. So we'll just continue. Yeah. But I promised it was going to happen. I made it happen. It happened, and now COVID's happened, and we'll just deal with that.
I mean, it's amazing. It's the relativity of everything, isn't it? I mean, people are looking at George Bush now, and as a great president, and he is by comparison.
What, senior or junior? Because neither of them.
Yeah, exactly. Both of them are. Both of them look amazing by comparison to Trump. So that's what's happened. I think that's happened in South Africa. I think COVID. I mean, obviously, it's horrific. The pain it's causing so many people, and the deaths, and how poor people are being the most severely affected. But maybe one little silver lining of it was that I think it distracted the world's attention from our financial downgrading, and I don't think that was as impactful as it would have been had we not had this big distraction of COVID-19.
Yeah, so there are highs and lows, I suppose. There's good and bad in everything. There's just a pity that there's so many deaths attached. and that from an
Yeah.
economic point of view, it's ruining a lot of industries. Everybody's going on about tourism, but it's not. It's every single industry is going to be touched. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier today. We were talking about restaurants. Yes, restaurants have opened. You can go and sit down perhaps, but in a 50-seater, you can only have like 5 people or 10 people. And is it worth the restaurant actually bringing in staff and, you know, all of that type of thing for 10 people who are going to tip, you know, $10 at the end of the evening? It's not even worth it. I don't want to go out anymore. I've become very reclusive, and I'm happy to do that. But now, how do you and Dr. Jack collaborate? You don't do it's not a daily cartoon that you're doing at the moment. It's a weekly, isn't it?
Yeah. So we used to do six a week, and we're just launching something. In fact, this is the first time we've spoken about it. It's going to appear in the report on this coming Sunday.
Right.
Which we're hoping will become a daily feature, but it's a pocket cartoon.
Okay.
And it's going to it's called Biltong and Stripes, or in Afrikaans Biltong in Streepies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's features a wildebeest and a zebra head mounted on the wall,
Right.
and the conversations that they have between themselves.
See what's behind me?
Yeah, no, you'll have to lift the screen. Oh, there's is that a Steenbok or an Arabi?
No, it's a Vleesbok. I didn't shoot it. I didn't shoot it. It was gifted to me.
Okay. That's lovely. Yeah, so we've got these 2 figures that are going to be the wildebeest is going to be a little bit right of center, and the zebra left of center.
Okay.
And that'll just make for a nice interplay between the two of them, and it's kind of typifies Jack and myself. He probably leans a little bit right to the right, and myself to the left. And we've managed to make it work, you know, because I think a big problem with what's happened in global dialogue is that the right shouts at the left and the left shouts at the right, and nobody's listening to one another. But Jack and I have been able to find a lot of common ground.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where we'll disagree with one another on an issue, and we'll have to find a workaround for that. But typically, you want to encourage this a dialogue between opposing views, instead of people just shouting one another down all the time, which is what's happening.
You've only got to go to Facebook to see that. You know, what do they say? Opinions are like arseholes. Everybody has one. But Facebook seems to be, if your opinion differs from mine, then you're rubbish. And now I must trash you as hard as I possibly can, and then troll the hell out of you so that you hide. You know, I've had it where I've started, you may or may not have the same thing with a cartoon, where your cartoon is meant to represent something specific. You and Dr. Jack started out with an idea. You post the image online, and then somebody has a different viewpoint, and the thread that then starts up around your cartoon heads off in a direction that you had no idea it was going.
Never intended. Absolutely.
Never intended.
Yeah, that happens so often, you know, and it's difficult even engaging with the discussion then, because whatever you say is going to get twisted. And so typically I try my hardest. Sometimes I get reeled into debates and that, but I prefer to let the cartoons do the talking, and I'm quite happy for the cartoons to be catalysts for that kind of debate. I think it's great, and whether people disagree with them or not, and even if people read their own things into them, I think that generally, people will know what you intended, and most people with their heads on their shoulders will know what the original intention was. I showed you earlier that the cartoon on the wall there by Steve Bell. that I collaborated with.
You're right.
And Steve Bell told me, this was in the days of print-only cartoons, and he said, you know, a cartoon is not should not be seen as an item unto itself. You've got to read it in context of the whole sea of editorial around it, and that all informs what the cartoon is about. And that's why he was using it to explain why one shouldn't over-explain and contextualize a cartoon. He says that the cartoon comes with all of that, and that's the whole body of work that makes the cartoon work. But today with social media, I think the comment section is as relevant as the title that you put to the cartoon, and it's actually a part of the cartoon itself. And even those comments that disagree with the cartoon, they're part of the discussion. And I think it's a good thing. There is a proviso, though. I mean, when the discussion veers off into sort of racist rants and all of that, then obviously, you know, I have no time for that. But but on the whole, I think opposing views are fine.
John, talk me through the birth of a cartoon.
Okay, well, so I didn't answer your question earlier, how Jack and I collaborate. So that might be a good starting point. So I conceptualize the cartoons, and Jack draws them, and it's been a partnership of over 10 years that's worked very well, because he's an amazing draftsman. I would regard him as the country's top draftsman from a cartooning perspective. And even though I drew for the Argus every day for a year, and I've drawn for other newspapers over the last 20 years, but my strengths are my ideas, and my passion is politics, and I regard myself as an activist. So I love rolling up my sleeves and getting into the meaty issues of everyday socio-political discussion, you know. And Jack would prefer not muddying his hands. Of course, he's got strong views, but he's a good guy. He likes to bring a little bit of light to the world, and he's a cartoonist in the true sense. He thinks that cartoons should be uplifting, but quite often they're not, because quite often they need to deal with some really serious issues. So we find a balance between ourselves there. I've got there's kind of two parts to what I do. The first thing is to decide on a theme, or decide on a subject to tackle, and quite often that's the hardest thing, because there's so many things out there, and sometimes you're spoiled for choice. It's like being in a video shop. There's so many great movies, and you just can't pick one, you know. And that becomes pressurizing as your deadline starts ticking away. If you haven't been able to sort of zoom in and focus on what subject I want to address. But once I've got that, it's the creative fluids start working quite well, and I'm fortunate I'm able to come up with ideas quite quickly once I know what to focus on. But it's getting to know what to focus on that for me is the tough part.
Right.
And then so I'll do a rough in a little sketchbook that I carry with me all over the place. And with modern technology, it's worked really well with Jack and I, because all I do is I photograph that rough and I WhatsApp it to him. And sometimes we'll have a little bit of toing and froing of, what about if we do this or that? Quite often he likes it as it is, and he does his magic, and he just turns it into this wonderful artwork. And then we send it onto the editor. So from his side, the creative thing is just deciding on a good layout for the cartoon, so that it makes a lot of sense. Quite often he adopts exactly what I've sent him, and other times he'll change it quite radically and just make it really pop. And then he does pencil work, then he does line art in pen, and then he takes it to his computer and he colors it and tweaks it from there.
My English, it is not well. Are all your cartoons in color, or do you do black and whites as well?
They've all been in color, mostly in color, although our city press cartoons are quite often monotone, not black and white, but they'll have it's kind of sepia look to them sometimes. But this new biltong and stripes feature that I mentioned and told you about is going to be monotone in grays. So it's grays and black and white.
Have you ever had one of your cartoons turned into a tattoo?
Geez, no, not to my knowledge.
The only reason I ask that is my very first tattoo, which I got 27 years ago, is part of a Far Side cartoon.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you show it to me in public?
No, it's on my shoulder, and it was, you know, if you've ever had tattoos, your first one you're always a bit nervous of. So I had it too small. The tattoo artist was brilliant, but he put a lot of detail into it. And unfortunately, over the last 27 years, it's almost an amorphous blob, and I've forgotten about it. But I wanted a cowboy theme, and I've got one of Gary Larson's vultures in a cowboy jacket and a hat. They just killed a cowboy.
Fantastic.
And because I think he's a genius, I really do. And he's about to come back online, I believe, because he retired at 44 and vanished off the planet. I could find nothing about him online. I wanted to do an interview with him, but about a year ago he said he was going to come back and do online stuff. I think either he needs the money or he figures that he has an audience still.
Yeah, well, he has an audience, but a whole new digital audience that don't know his stuff, you know. And you couldn't find Gary Larson cartoons online.
No.
It was quite strange.
I was bored at some particular point. I remember we went away somewhere for a weekend, and I had a Gary Larson book with me, and I photographed all my favorite cartoons, and I wrote a whole blog as a tribute to him. I don't know if he's ever seen it, but I did say that the images were taken without permission. Have you found that your cartoons have ended up in places that because you put them online, that they've ended up in places that you never expected they would, or utilized without your permission?
Yes, and usually it's great. You know, usually it's a compliment, and if they get subverted and the meaning behind them gets subverted, particularly if it's subverted, used for ill causes, you know, to propagate misogynistic or racist or whatever viewpoints. That, I mean, obviously one doesn't like to see that.
Yeah.
But we a couple of instances that spring to mind during the Zuma protests against Zuma's presidency that captured the whole nation a few years ago. Somebody sent us, I was in Cape Town at the time, and sent me a photograph of someone who'd blown up one of our cartoons and was using it as a placard, and that's great to see. And we've seen that also at media freedom protests outside Parliament. And then somebody rode the Cape Argus cycle race with one of our cartoons on their back, which was celebrating the firemen who just put out a big a whole lot of fires in Cape Town. And so they did it as a tribute to the firemen, and that was wonderful to see, you know. And
because those are the things you're not expecting. So show me. You said you've printed out 4. So show me another one, or show the viewers another one, and tell us the story behind it.
Sure. So I thought I'd pick this one out. This was one of our first. Might have been our first, but I think we first or second or third COVID cartoon. And this was done on the 8th of March this year for City Press, and it shows the president and the health minister standing outside Parliament. And in February, March, we were
No,
about to
comrade,
roll
this
up our
is not
sleeves.
the new door.
Yeah, we were about to roll up our sleeves and get tucked into the year, and then all of a sudden, this big virus appeared. And I think that cartoon kind of anticipates what was to come quite well.
Well, if that was on the 8th of March, I mean, we went into lockdown on the 26th. So
yes.
you were ahead of the 8 ball there in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, I think I should tell you that Jack saw this coming. I think going back to December almost. I mean, China only officially acknowledged it on the 31st of December, if I remember correctly. But when there were the earliest rumblings of this new virus, Jack was onto it and said, "Come, we've got to do some cartoons." And I said, "Well, let's see how it sort of rolls out." And
boy, did it roll out!
Yeah, and it was only a few weeks later, and it was just inevitable. And I think, I mean, we might have been ahead of the curve. I think South Africa was ahead of the curve in sort of recognizing it and dealing with it.
Because I always thought when it happened, in every great disaster movie that's ever been written, it always happens in the Northern Hemisphere. Tidal waves, icebergs, vampires, zombies. Nobody comes to the southern tip of Africa. So when it happened, I was one of the first who said, it'll never come down here. We're going to be all right. The rest of the world is going to die and South Africa is going to survive. Boy, was I ever wrong. This particular, I mean, as I said to somebody recently, we're living in a book, a TV series, and a movie currently. Because all of those will happen.
You're right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It's been horrific how it's just exploded, and I think we haven't seen the worst of it yet here in South Africa.
That's the scary thing. John, do you have a platform where your cartoons and other cartoonists' work appears?
Yes. In 2008, on Mandela's 90th birthday, I launched a platform called Africartoons. And it was quite innovative at the time because most cartoonists, everybody knew Zapiro's work. And if you asked anyone to name 3 cartoonists, they could name Zapiro and perhaps Dov Fedler and a few others, but they didn't know most of the cartoonists that were operating around the country. For the first time, we brought them all together on a website which we called Africartoons. And that initially it was just cartoons about Nelson Mandela's political life, and it was celebrating, using the occasion of his 90th birthday to celebrate his contribution. But very quickly became clear that we should just keep adding cartoons to it, and we did, and it became almost like what do they call those water dispensers in the office, where cartoonists all of a sudden gathered together and they could see one another's work and they could start engaging with one another. And it was the early days, or relatively early days, of the internet, and most other cartoonists didn't even have their work online, so all of a sudden they did. Unfortunately, we built that on very old architecture, which keeps collapsing. So and it was at huge expense. We got a top computer guy or top web developer to develop exactly what we wanted, and it's just it's all sort of imploded. But before it did, we moved to Facebook, and we just found Facebook was a much better platform to disperse the work and just to show people, to showcase everyone's cartoons. And that our Facebook Africartoons page now has 1.25 million followers on
Wow.
it. I think it makes it the biggest cartooning group in the world, and certainly the biggest African presence of cartooning. We're bigger than the SABC and the Star newspaper and all the big media houses. We're amongst the top 5 big media houses, South African media houses on Facebook. So that's been an encouragement. Over this COVID period, I've not been uploading cartoons to it as often as I used to. I'm kind of just taking a bit of a break, but it's if any of your viewers are interested, they should just pop over to Africartoons on Facebook.
Are people able to buy the work via that platform? Or is it merely for exposure?
It's merely for exposure, but you raise a good point, and this is what we need to do now to make it sustainable, and to also assist cartoonists in being able to generate an extra income for themselves. So that's been a plan for a long time, but now it's become a more urgent plan, I think. Particularly as cartoonists are needing to take cuts in what they're earning, and a lot of them are losing their gigs.
You know, John, you say that. I'm just wondering, artists are recognized as artists. And you have a Picasso on your wall and everybody goes, ooh, ah. As a photographer, I know how difficult it is to sell photographs, because photographs don't seem to be seen as art. You look at David Goldblatt's work and people go, why must we pay 30,000 Rand for a photograph? Take a close look at his work and then you'll realize why you're paying 30,000 Rand for that. Where do cartoons slot into this? Are they seen as art, or are they seen as, it's just somebody scribbling so they can just give it to me? I don't need to pay an exorbitant amount for an original.
Well, you know, it's I think in some instances cartoonists have been their own worst enemies, because they haven't regarded their artwork with the high regard that it deserves. I mean, a couple of the great cartoonists, I won't name them, in South Africa, there are about 30 professional cartoonists, editorial cartoonists in the country. That number fluctuates from year to year, but it's always around there. And I've seen what they work on. They'll draw a beautiful artwork on the back of a second-hand photocopy piece of paper from their printer, you know, that's got something on the other side. And the times when we've scanned Africartoons, our website, which is down now, but has a catalogue of 26,000 cartoons. I'd go and fetch cartoons from top cartoonists, and they'd give me these piles that looked like they'd been in their car boot for, you know, the past few years. And it's terrible. So I think cartoonists need to step up and to actually make their work is already amazing, but make it more presentable, and to not to hand it out for freely as often as they do. And but there's another problem, is that editorial cartooning quite often has a sell-by date, and so only a handful of geeky people like yourself and myself are inclined to want to put them up on our walls. So there's that too. But a few years ago, and I think you might have attended it, we held an exhibition.
I remember it well.
Yeah. And Africartoons hosted a corner of that exhibition, but we worked with the curators of it, Yul Demasio and Michaela, his partner. And the section that we put up was titled Arttoons. And what we did was we sought from all the cartoonists work in which they'd parodied the great artworks from around the world. So the Mona Lisa and the Japanese wave, I can never remember the name of
Tsunami.
fantastic piece, yeah.
Yeah.
And not the
No.
artwork of that, yeah.
Yeah.
And but Michelangelo pieces and just all great artworks that had been turned into cartoons, and we had a section, and that enjoyed a lot of attention, and people saw value in buying those because
didn't Yule do a Last Supper? That was an enormous piece. It eventually sold.
yes,
But it raised a lot of eyebrows. But I think that's exactly what he intended. He wanted to initiate debate and discussion.
It wasn't the Last Supper.
What was it?
What was the title? He called it the Night Watch, but the original work wasn't the Night Watch. It was.
Was it?
But it was the dissecting of.
That's Nelson Mandela.
He had Nelson Mandela on the table, and
that's right.
He had a whole lot of other South African political personalities standing around, responding in different ways. From Nkosi Johnson, I'm sure Thabo Mbeki was there. I'm not too sure if Jacob Zuma was, but yes, he had a.
So where to now for John and Jack?
Well, we're quite excited about this biltong and stripes feature that we're doing. I don't yet know what to call it, because it's not an editorial cartoon per se. It's more like a pocket cartoon. It's not a strip, but it's something that we're hoping to franchise and get it, or not franchise, to syndicate and get it out to offer it at a really reasonable price and get it out to as many publications online and in print around the country that we can. So that's our next big project.
Okay, so for your next cartoon, share with us the one that you've got still got two more lying next to you.
Yes, I've still got two more.
Yeah.
So let me show you this one, which I hope would be self-explanatory.
My friends and I, John, and I don't smoke, but many of them do. Yeah. Every time, if you have to mention her name for whatever reason, you have to spin around 3 times and spit. You're not allowed to say her name. You can't even use her initials anymore.
Yeah, she hasn't endeared herself. I don't smoke either, but it just seems outrageous how hard they've come down on smokers.
Well, now
I understand a bit of the rationale, but it just seems very insensitive. Smokers at a time like this are needing that relief.
Yeah.
My mother was a big smoker. I'm anti-smoking, but I'm more anti the way the government has just clamped down on it. Like
all this is done, and maybe there's a cartoon in this, there's unleashed a black market of note. I mean,
yes,
there are some
absolutely.
rubbish cigarettes being made right here in Johannesburg. And if NDZ is worried about carcinogens, there are more carcinogens in these rubbish cigarettes than there are in the properly made ones. People are going to die of strange illnesses rather than just
outrageous.
The regular cancers or emphysema. But I see today, and I didn't read the whole thing. My daughter always accuses me of looking at headlines and then making a judgment based just on the headline and not reading the actual story at all. And I did this in this case as well.
You should at least go into the cartoons and read the cartoons. Read the headlines and the cartoons.
Yeah. But in this particular case, it was Bheki Cele, our Minister of Police, saying that they're going to decriminalize tobacco products during lockdown. And I thought, but you haven't criminalized it. You've only stopped it being sold. People are buying it. Oh, trust me. But they're paying what was 20 Rand a packet. They're now paying 70 and 80 bucks. But it's out there. It's not like you can't find it. And those that can't find the cigarettes are now growing weed in their backyard because that's legal. So you can grow weed and smoke that, but you can't buy cigarettes.
No, it's totally crazy what's been going on. I'm glad you brought up our Minister of Police, because he's in the last of the cartoons that I've
Okay.
pointed out to you.
Otherwise,
But
he'd be upset.
Yes, exactly. But this is all about how about at the time the 17 reported deaths and 376 cases of police assault and corruption, and the fact that 230,000 civilians, it's over 250,000 now, I think, had been arrested for lockdown offences. So this is the heavy-handedness of the police at this time, and this was drawn, as you'll see, just after the George Floyd murder in the United States.
Yeah. Yep. I can't breathe.
Yeah. It's tragic, eh?
It is indeed. And if you read social media at the moment, it's ongoing in America. The vitriol that is being, if we thought we were a racist country, or we've been accused of being racist, look at what is happening in America at the moment. Look at the Karens that are coming out of the woodwork and screaming at people of color for no particular reason. And just as an aside, there was one video I was watching yesterday where a woman accuses two teenagers of picking berries in a public park. And she said, "You people have now ruined the park. You know, and why don't you," and I love this expression, "why don't you go back to where you came from?" So they say to her, "We come from America. We were born and bred here. Were you born in America?" And she goes, "No." And they say to her, "Well, then how can you tell us to go back to where we come from? Why don't you go back to where you come from?" Woman shot herself in the foot. But the vitriol is frightening. It really and truly is.
It's scary, and I think it's indicative of. I mean, it's very raw and evident in America right now. But I think it's true right around the world. You know, in Europe and still in South Africa. What this cartoon was trying to point out is because there was this whole Black Lives Matter movement. But at the same time, people like Collins Causa, who'd been murdered by police here, there wasn't as much of an outcry about it. And one would have thought that, okay, you know, maybe people just accepted that these things happen in South Africa, which should never be the case. But surely once the whole George Floyd thing happened, there should have been a pickup of protest in South Africa against what's happening here. So when we posted this online, we called this cartoon "All Black Lives Matter," sort of appropriating the misdirected "All Lives Matter" thing. But all Black Lives Matter, because why isn't there more concern about the many poor and Black lives in South Africa that are being subjected to the same treatment, and whether it's from Black or white people is regardless, you know. So that was the sentiment behind that.
Are all your cartoons, both you and Dr. Jack, are they all skewed towards South African? So in other words, you've taken what was a sort of an international incident in the visual, and then you've added copy that speaks to South Africa, or do you? I'm thinking, of course, because that stupid woman that was Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend or partner was caught yesterday. I mean, she goes back to America. What does she think? And I see the memes are already starting, saying that yes, she has she's going to commit suicide, type of thing. But would you tackle something like that, or because it doesn't have a South African connotation, maybe it's not worthy of a cartoon?
You'll remember that first cartoon that I showed of Donald Trump as sitting in Lucy's box.
Yes.
That's an all-American cartoon. So we love tackling international issues, but it's a bit of a frustration of mine, actually. I don't know if it's South African cartoonists or our news industry in general, but is quite myopic. We focus mainly on South African issues. And I'd love for us to, because by looking at the faults and mistakes of other countries, we can feel a little bit, we can forgive ourselves a little bit and feel a little bit better about ourselves. And I wish South African cartoonists and news industry on the whole would do that, you know, focus on other issues. Not to say that the issues here aren't pressing and important, but I think they're lessons that we can learn from what's happening elsewhere. And every now and again, we can give ourselves a bit of a pat on the back for getting some things right, or not doing them as badly as they.
John, are your cartoons available for? Are these cartoons available for sale?
Yes, absolutely. So an unfortunate consequence of the digitization of our industry is that quite often our originals are only originals in black and white, and the color has been added later. So we've sold a bunch of our cartoons before, but what we tend to do is also give a signed version of the color as a signed color version as well, which might look better on the wall, but the original artwork would, I think, be good value to keep for someone to keep.
So to round off our chat, if people were looking to buy your cartoons, or you and Dr. Jack, how do they go about it, John?
All they need to do is contact us. So they can find either of us on Facebook, or they can. I'm happy to give my number out. Shall I?
If you want to,
give my phone number. They can WhatsApp or call me, John Curtis, on 073-267-9599, and we'd be very glad to. We're very keen to sell our artwork.
Great stuff. I have been in conversation with John Curtis. John, wonderful to chat to you. Thank you so much for giving of your time. I look forward to your next cartoon.
Thanks very much, David, and thanks very much for the support you've always given to our industry.